So in the first book of the Bible, Genesis, we're going to go to chapter 38. And we're doing a series, remember, called The Great Unknowns, where we are talking about characters in the Bible that don't normally get a lot of attention. And her name is Tamar. So Genesis chapter 38, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of a warning. We're going to the dark side of the Bible today. Okay? This is where the Bible gets dark and gets rated R. So for the teenagers in the room, I'm sorry. It gets a little graphic. But I've always believed that if the Bible talks about it, we should talk about it too, as believers. So if it's in the Bible, it's okay to talk about. So even though it is graphic and it is one of the wildest, craziest stories in the Bible, we're still going to talk about it. All right? But the overarching theme of what we're going to be looking at is that even when life veers off course, God is still at work behind the scenes. You see, God's purposes can't be thwarted. What God wants to have happen is going to happen. And no amount of injustice or setbacks or personal failure is going to stop God's big picture. Have you ever thought that life was going in one direction, and then all of a sudden it takes a hard right turn? And you're like, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be down this road at all. This is not where I thought my life was going. This is definitely not what I planned for my life. When our dreams are sometimes delayed or even denied. And we're left with a few options. We can either give up, we can lash out at other people, or we can keep pushing on in faith. And we're going to see in this lady, Tamar, that she's going to press forward and not let the setback stop her. And her story reminds us that God continues to work even through pain, even through detours and delays, even through dysfunction. God continues to work. Genesis chapter 38, Judah and Tamar. It happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He took her and went in to her, and she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Yet again she bore a son and called his name Shelah. Judah was in Chezib when she bore him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. All right, here we go. Here's where it starts to get a little funky, okay? So Judah is the patriarch. He's the head of the family. And he has found a wife that is not part of God's people. And God was very clear in the Old Testament, I don't want you to marry people outside of the faith. And now this is not about race relations. Okay, this is not about not mixing with other racial groups. That's not it at all. And the Bible never has an issue with mixed race relationships. All right, I've been asked that flat out to my face because I'm in one. I thought the Bible didn't approve of mixed race relationships. Nope, that's not what it's talking about. God is clear that we need to be careful who we connect to because of how people will influence our lives. And God knew that if his people intermarried with people from a different faith, that other faith could distract them and pull them away. Which is the first piece that we need to learn today is that people influence our patterns. People influence our patterns. Psychologists say that we are a mixture of the 5 people we hang out with the most. Who you are is a combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with, which is kind of neat. But it also can be kind of scary if you think about the people that you are hanging out with. Like, oh, wait a minute. I'm hanging out with Private Schmuckatelli and so-and-so, and holy cow. That's why my life has been going the way it is, because these people are influencing me. People influence our patterns. God knew that, which is why God said, I don't want you to marry people from a different faith that's going to pull you away from me. That's Judah's first mistake. He goes and he finds himself a Canaanite wife, someone who was not part of the faith, and now there's that influence in his family. And the children that come from this relationship are they're wicked children. They don't follow God. They're not ones who follow Yahweh and stick to God's laws. There's this outside influence now that has come in. So we have really got to watch the crowd that we hang out with. And this is not to say that we need to seclude ourselves and lock ourselves away from other people. That's not what I'm saying. What I really am saying, though, is check the influences in your life. Are you influencing other people, or are you being influenced by other people? You hear me? Judah's first mistake was not checking the people that had influence in his life. So he's got these boys, and they are not great boys. So getting down to verse 7. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. All right. Now we're going to get really wonky. In the Old Testament, there's this thing called levirate marriage. And it's an old law that says this: if a woman becomes a widow and she has no children, her deceased husband's brother needs to provide a child for her so that the family line can carry on. I'm going to say this again because it's weird and it's not part of our normal understanding of how we function. All right? And just so you can get a picture, I'm married, been married 23 years. I have kids. But just say, for example, I did not have kids and we were living back then. If I died and my wife had no kids, it would be my brother's responsibility to come in and father a child on my behalf. And then the child would not be my brother's, it would technically still be my child and carry on my line. Okay? That's a really weird law, isn't it? Yeah. So here's what happened. Tamar married Judah's firstborn, but he was an evil dude. He was a total dirtbag, and he died. So verse 8. Now remember that law, the levirate marriage. Then Judah said to Onan, secondborn, go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her, and raise up offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, so whenever he went to his brother's wife, he would waste the semen on the ground, so as not to give offspring to his brother. All right, you tracking what's happening? He had a responsibility to keep his brother's family line going, so every time he would go into his sister-in-law, rather than impregnating her, he would pull out and spill his semen on the ground so that there was no child produced. Right? This is wild. And this is in the Bible. Can you believe that? So God killed him also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, hey, whoa, pump the brakes. Remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah, my son, grows up. For Judah feared that he would die like his brothers. So Tamar went and remained in her father's house. And in the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. When Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shears, he and his friend Hira, the Adullamite. And when Tamar was told, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, wrapping herself up, and sat at the entrance of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up, and she had not been given to him in marriage. All right. She had been promised the third son so that the family line could continue, but she sees now the son has grown up, and her father-in-law hasn't kept his promise. He is leaving her to be a widow and not fulfilling the family obligations. The plan that she thought was going into place suddenly took that right turn. She's like, I did not plan to be here. This is not where I was supposed to be. This was not what we were worked out. God had set these protections in place for me. Now all of a sudden, it's not happening. And this is really the second thing I want you to get when you are denied what God has promised. And sometimes justice is delayed, God's promises are delayed, and the question is to us, what will we do in the meantime when we are denied what God says we deserve? Now, Tamar was left vulnerable, she's left abandoned. Rather than give up, she decides to act decisively within the framework of her culture. And again, this is not our culture. This is the ancient Near East, so it's different time, different place. So we don't judge people from different time, a different place, a different culture. Just understand it's different, okay? So she takes off her widow's clothes, and she goes and she sits down. Verse 15, when Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He turned to her at the roadside and said, "Come, let me come into you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" He answered, "I will send you a young goat from the flock." And she said, "If you give me a pledge until you send it." He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet," that's a ring, "your signet and your cord and your staff that is in your hand." All right, so just to make sure you're tracking what's going on in the story. Homeboy went up, thought he was hiring a prostitute. And so they're negotiating the price. He's like, "Hey, I'll give you a goat." She's like, "Cool, but you don't have the goat with you. What are you going to give me as a promissory note that you're going to send the goat?" He's like, "What do you want?" She's like, "Give me your ring, your cord, and the staff that you're carrying." He's like, "Bet." Takes off his ring, hands it over, his ring, his cord, his staff, hands it over to her. This guy was not thinking with his brain, right? He was not. Lots of life lessons in here for Marines. She replied, "Your signet, your cord, and the staff that's your hand." So he gave them to her. So he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose and went away, taking off her veil, put on the garments of her widowhood. Then when Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite to take back the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. And he asked the men of the place, "Where is the cult prostitute who was at Enaim at the roadside?" And they said, "No cult prostitute has been here." So he returned to Judah and said, "Bro, I haven't found her." And the men said, "There's no prostitute that's been there." And Judah said, "Let her keep those things as her own, or we will be laughed at. You see, I sent the young goat, but you didn't find her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Moreover, she is pregnant by immorality." And Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." So it's been a few months. Now she is showing. She's a widow. She ain't supposed to be pregnant. So Judah's like, whoa. This person who is part of my household is pregnant. She's obviously been immoral. We are going to put this woman to death. We're going to burn her. Which is the third thing that I really want you guys to get from this story. Don't judge what you don't understand. And see, it's easy to criticize people without realizing how guilty we are ourselves. Judah hears that Tamar is pregnant. He's like, "Oh, this has been an immoral woman. We're going to put her to death." But what is the cause of her immorality? It's the dude. It's him. He is the one who is the cause for her pregnancy. He is judging what he doesn't understand. So it goes on. "Bring her out and let her be burned." Verse 25. As she was brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, "By the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant." And she said, "Please, identify who these are, the signet and cord and staff." Then Judah identified them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I did not give to her my son Shelah." And he did not know her again. You see, Judah was judging without understanding that big picture. And as she is brought out and she is about to be put to death, she's like, "Hey, who does this ring belong to?" And the staff. I can just imagine Judah's reaction as his stomach just drops to the floor. He's got that oh crap moment. He's like, he recognizes, oh, yeah, that's mine, which means the oh crap, that's mine too. And he realizes that he was the one who was in the wrong the whole time, because he owed her a chance to keep her family line going. He denied her the protection that God had put in place. And so she made sure to keep it going. But she said, I've got to do this because they are withholding from me what God had set in place. And we have to make sure that we are not like Judah, that we are judging quickly without realizing our own fault. The Bible talks about checking for a little speck in someone's eye when we've got a huge honking plank in our own. And Jesus says, hey, take the stuff out of your own eye before you go deal with somebody else. And he's not saying don't help other people. He's not saying don't point out how other people need to change. But what Jesus is saying is check yourself first so that then you can be clear-eyed to see how to help other people. A lot of times people say, well, the Bible says don't judge. Oh, Jesus is saying get yourself right first so that you can better help other people. Be slow to judge. Examine your own faults before moving on to help other people. And we always have to remember we got to replace the harsh correction with grace-filled love. And a lot of times I see Christians say, I'm going to talk about the truth in love. They need to hear it, as though that gives them permission to be Christian jerks. No, you're wrong. You're not following God. Blah, 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 blah. And so they're really a jerk to people. And we are never given permission to be jerks. Every time that we are supposed to talk to people about righteousness and behavior and what God is calling us to do and who God is calling us to be, it's supposed to be in a corrective, grace-filled, love-covered way. We can confront sin, but do it in a way that loves, restores, and builds people up after we've already checked our own hearts. Judah was ready to burn Tamar to death, not realizing he was the one who was in the wrong. We've got to check our own hearts so that we are not judging what we don't understand. And the last thing I really want you to get from this, the big picture, God's purposes will always prevail. God's purposes will always prevail, no matter what the detour is, no matter what the dysfunction is, no matter the level of brokenness of your story. Now, this story is pretty messed up, right? You read something like this, you're like, holy crap, what in the world? If they were to turn this into a movie, it would definitely be a rated R movie for adult themes and content. Right? This is not appropriate for children. This is scripture, but this is not appropriate for children. What in the world? But we see that no matter the dysfunction and the brokenness, God's purposes always prevail. Because listen to how the story ends. When the time came for her labor, verse 27, there were twins in her womb. And when she was in labor, one put out a hand. And the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on it, saying, this one came out first. But as he drew back his hand, look, his brother came out. And she said, what a breach you have made for yourself. Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterward his brother came out with the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Now here's the thing. Perez, one of the babies here, is an ancestor of King David. The king who was the King David, wrote the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The King David, like David and Bathsheba, King David came from this birth. From this broken, dysfunctional story comes the line that brings about King David and ultimately Jesus. You see, God's purposes will prevail no matter how crazy and how broken and how dysfunctional our story is, which gives us hope. Because if we look in the mirror at our own lives, we might think, oh, I've got a lot of dysfunction. Chaps, if you only knew the level of brokenness in my life, and I'm here to tell you, God doesn't care. Because God's purposes will prevail no matter what kind of dysfunction or brokenness you've experienced in your life. This crazy story with a couple dead sons, their father visiting a prostitute who ends up impregnating his own daughter-in-law. What? Ends up being the line that brings about King David and then King Jesus. You may feel broken, dysfunctional. You may feel like Tamar, abandoned, betrayed, but God's purposes will always prevail. How do we move forward from here? First, we take inventory of your influences. Remember, the people in your life set up what your life looks like. So take an inventory. Who is influencing you? Are they helping you draw closer to God or pulling you farther away? Secondly, advocate for what's right rather than what's easy. Judah should have done what was right. He should have helped take care of the widow and given his last son to her to keep the line going. Their society had a system in place for taking care of widows, and he didn't do what was right. We need to make sure that we are always advocating for what is right, with courage, with wisdom, but doing what is right rather than what is easy. Third, we need to offer grace, not judgment. Judah was quick to jump on the judgment train. She's pregnant. She's a widow. Let's put her to death. Burn her! He was quick to jump on that judgment when he could have offered grace. If he had offered grace first, it would have saved him a whole lot of heartache. And he realized how he was wrong. And the final piece is we've got to trust God with the long game. And sometimes when our life takes that detour and we're at a place we don't expect, like, God, what is going on? We want immediate results. And we've got to trust that God has got us, that his purposes will always come to pass even when we can't see what's going on. Trust God for the long game. Crazy story, but I think that it speaks powerfully into our lives today, into our brokenness, into our dysfunction. And I'm here to tell you guys, God has got you no matter what. And as we live through our brokenness and our dysfunction, we need to treat others with grace and compassion and love, being slow to judge and trusting that God has got us all.